When our fall is in service to reaching new heights, we can't even really look at it as a fall, but as a necessity for obtaining growth. Now, I was reading Thus Spoke Zarathustra by Friedrich Nietzsche recently, and he had a parable, if you will, of, well, there was a tree, and it was growing on the side of a mountain, and there was a man near this tree, and Zarathustra approached him, and Zarathustra pushed on the tree, and he said, if I could, you can see me pushing on this tree, I can feel me pushing on this tree, but the tree, I could do this forever and the tree won't waver. The tree, it was too big, he's not going to be able to push the tree down. Even if he sat there his whole life pushing on this tree, it wouldn't budge. But he says the invisible forces braid this tree with barrages day in and day out, and they wear the tree down. And sometimes they win. And that is the wind. The wind is an invisible force that we can't see, but it does much damage to trees. And the higher the tree grows, the more susceptible it is to be destroyed by this invisible thing we call wind. And invisible, obviously, to the eye. Wind is obviously not invisible in totality, but in as much as we can see it, it is. And he says the higher this tree grows, the more susceptible it is to fall. But whilst it is reaching new heights, it is elevated, for symbolism and terminology, height is very symbolic for, growth, divinity, reaching up to the heavens, and, you know, downward motions going down is that like going into, hell, going lower, becoming worse, like Plato's allegory of the cave, the cave is underground and, the light is above and you go in and out of the cave. And he says the roots of this tree grow deeper. They're into deeper depths, into more darkness. And I think that's such a beautiful way to view our growth and to view life in general. As we grow ever higher, as we become better, as we become more, as we get closer to our goals, our dreams, our aspirations, the wind is berating us more and more. And to combat that, our roots must go deeper. So paradoxically, while we are achieving ever new heights, while we are becoming more, while we are doing things, while we are becoming better, at the same time we are becoming worse, and we are becoming more deep in the mire. We are going deeper into the darkness, into the depths with our roots, and sometimes we grow too quick. Sometimes we grow before our roots are ready. And when this happens, the wind can become unbearable and can destroy us, can make us fall. And if you truly pray to get what you need and not what you want, at times your growth will be halted and you will be called upon to the depths to regrow your roots. And this can look like so many different things. This can be giving into things you never thought you would give into again, to re-establish solid roots into never doing that again. Obtaining a new understanding and a new relationship with your potential to still fall and with the temptations that you do have. And if you're, the fall in this way being in stopping your growth to grow your roots, if that is in service to soaring ever higher, to new heights never before reached, to having a more solid base, so that the wind has less effect on the branches, on the tree as a whole, then is the fall not flight? Is it not paramount and essential to reaching ever new heights? Now, I know this is, metaphor, I guess not even metaphorical, but I mean, potentially, but symbolic language. It is so, at least for me in my life right now, it is so apparent on how this is true. On how the higher we soar, the better we become, the more elevated, the stronger of a warrior we become for God, the more Satan wants us to fall. God's strongest warriors are tempted most by the devil. And when you realize that, being tempted is just seen in a whole new light. Because you no longer view it as being this urge that you get, but you view it as the work of the devil. You no longer view it as a earthly bodily thing, but you view it as the devil trying to make you fall, trying to take you away from God, trying to make you become less than you are. Mike Tyson once said, you're loved by God. I forget exactly what he said, but he was talking to this guy and he says, he's like, you're loved by God, but that means you're loved by the devil. And that is so true, because for the devil to win, he needs God's strongest warriors. And we shouldn't view our temptation, we shouldn't hate the fact that we are tempted. Jesus spent, 40 days, I think, fasting and on a hill being tempted by the devil. And he resisted temptation for 40 days. Imagine how strong the temptation was for Jesus' sword ever higher. The wind would have hit him the hardest. You'd think it would be an easy victory for a man of that nature, for a man of that caliber. But it isn't, because men of that nature, men of that caliber, know more than anyone how hard the journey is going to be. They know more than anyone how much suffering there is, even in living a life true to yourself, even in becoming that which you are meant to become, even in soaring ever higher. There is still so much suffering. And if anything, there may even be more suffering than the other journey, than the journey to hell. But the divine journey has a strong why. And as Nietzsche said, he who has a why can bear almost any how. But there's no why in the journey to the depths. There's only existential crisis and the suffering without meaning. It isn't the suffering that hurts us. It is suffering without meaning that makes the suffering unbearable. And if you have meaning, if you have a strong enough why, you will bear anyhow. You will realize that, yes, I am suffering, but it is all in service to something great. It is all in service to becoming that which I am. It is all in service to true happiness, to true pleasure, to true tranquility, to true peace of mind. And every once in a while, you'll soar too high. And if your roots weren't founded deep enough, not strong enough, if your base isn't so strong, you'll have to return to the depths. And it's a hard thing to come to terms with, and it's also a hard thing to it's hard to get out of the depths once you've returned. It's not easy. And this metaphor, this analogy, this has been a thing for thousands of years. This is what the allegory of the cave is. The man in the cave who gets out of the cave, what happens first? he is hit by the sun, and the sun hurts his eyes very much, and he has to return to the cave because I'm pretty sure he returns to the cave because the light hurts his eyes so much. Now, he does it in service to being able to, small doses so he can bear the light in totality. But at first, he isn't able to just waltz up to the surface. He isn't able to just bask in the light. It's too much for him. He must return to the depths. He must gain new understanding. He must have deeper roots. And then, once he is well founded, he has a service, he has a duty to call others to the heights. And imagine how hard it is to return to the depths. Go to the depths, and then after so long have to go through that painful experience again of seeing the light. It's so worth it. It must be done. It needs to be done. But it doesn't make it easier. It doesn't make it harder. Or it doesn't make it easier. And it's so much easier to stay in the darkness. Because, yeah, there's suffering. There's the suffering of knowing that which you could be. There's the suffering of knowing you're not living a life true to yourself. There's the suffering of willful blindness. But it's never so front-loaded. It's never so unbearable as it is to have that light burning your eyes. But we are called upon to bear this. And once you see the light, you can never go back. There is, ignorance is bliss in a way, but the one who has seen the light can never become ignorant again. So don't try. At times, as I said, we fall, but we fall as Icarus fell. We fall laughing, we fall smiling, for we know to fall means to have one sword. And there's nothing better than that. There's nothing better than flying. Even though flying makes you susceptible to fall, it's better to have flown than to have never flown at all. Or it's better to have flown and fallen than to have never flown and never fallen. And if you are falling right now, just pray is in service to reaching new heights. And you can get to a weird place in one's journey. For I believe recently I fell. And I think as of today, my free fall stopped. And you may say, it's hard to know that, or how can you know that? And I know it because I knew deep down, I was reading, I was writing, and I was saying things that I used to live by, but that I no longer lived by. And it pained me to say, to read, to write these things when I was no longer writing from a point of view of who I am, but who I was. I was writing what I used to think, writing what I knew was right, but not what I no longer practiced. And that was hard. And I just knew change wasn't there. I remember reading Confessions by St. Augustine, and at this point, almost 2 months ago, and 3 months ago, and that was the beginning of my fall. And time's gone by quick, and I don't have as much to show for it as I wish. But if try to remind myself of this is all in service to reaching new heights. This is all in service to to having a stronger roots, deeper roots. And I had to go into the darkness to do that. There's no other way. There's no other way to grow your roots than to go into the darkness. There's no other way. And I remember it all started with this book because I read it and the words hit home so deeply. They rang home so true. I knew that they were right. I knew that they were the things that I had to do. But I knew I wasn't going to do them. I knew I couldn't. I just knew deep down it wasn't going to happen. I knew deep down it would one day, but not today, not tomorrow, not the next day. I could feel myself falling. And as I started this statement, it was the awareness was weird because I've become so self-aware. I believe I've become to know myself so wholly, deeply, and completely that I knew I wasn't going to stop, that I knew I couldn't stop the fall. I knew I couldn't. And that's a weird feeling because you want to, but you can't. And it sucks. There's much despair in that. There's much despair, there's much hardship, there's much anguish. And 3 months I've had to deal with that. And I finally feel it. I finally can feel the free fall stopping. And I know deep down it was in service to reaching new heights. I know deep down it happened for the best. I know I'll look back and I can say I wasted 2 months, wasted 2 to 3 months of my life. But sometimes you got to take a step back to take 2 steps forward. And if you take a step back and it's in service to 2 steps forward, you can't view that step back as a step back, but almost as a step forward. And that's all I'm viewing this recent dilemma in. I now, for a long time, I read things and I knew I was going to change. I knew that was going to happen. I at least knew I would strive completely and utterly for that. I could just feel it. I just knew it. And then over the last few months, I would read and I knew I wouldn't do it. I would write and I knew I wouldn't do it. I would say and I knew I wasn't doing it. And then the worst part was that I knew I wasn't trying as hard as I could. And that's a weird place to be in. It's a hard place to be in. But it almost felt divine. As if, as if God gave Satan to me, or God gave me over to Satan, knowing that I would return, knowing that I needed that to become a stronger warrior for him. And maybe that's maybe that's all, just cope to make me feel good about it. But even if so, if I soar to ever new heights, why does it matter? Who cares? Then I'll return to the story from Nietzsche. We need to realize that the higher we go, the more susceptible we are to temptation. Pressure is privilege. These temptations we feel, they are a privilege. They're a privilege because we're so strong. We are so valuable on the dark side that the dark side has to put so much energy into getting us over. We should be grateful of this. It's not easy abstaining. It's not easy. But nothing worth doing has ever been easy. Ever. And the wind, the unseen forces, they get all of us. They are on all of us. They are berating all of us. Do not view yours as hardship. View it as grace. View it as divine luck, that you are privileged to deal with these temptations, because overcoming them makes you even stronger. Defeating them makes you even more worthy. And you can become an example to those who struggle. You can talk from the inside. You can talk from experience. And you can help those who are mired in the same darkness that you've been mired in for so long. And that's a beautiful thing. That's a truly beautiful thing. And just have patience. If you are, there's life is just full of seasons, and if you're in a season of growth where you're reaching ever new heights, be grateful. Enjoy it. Take it all in. But be humble. Don't let your pride get the best of you. I let my pride get the best of me, thinking I could never fall again, thinking I was now beyond the things I used to give into, the things people around me were giving into, thinking that I no longer could fall. And I think in my pride I fell. But now I can see that I had to fall because of my pride. I had to lose my pride, and the only way to lose my pride was to fall. And now I can reach ever new heights, but this time with no pride, and I'll be able to reach higher heights for that. And if you are falling, realize that it is in service to something. And if you can just stop, look around, and realize what that is, you will soar again faster, higher, and better than before. And that's what it's all about. That is truly what it is all about. Becoming the best version of yourself. Becoming that who you are. What does your conscience say you should do? You should become who you are. And your conscience knows who you are. Now, I hope wherever you are in life, this helps you. If you are falling, realize that it's in service to growth. It's in service to flight, if you allow it to. It's your choice at the end of the day. You can stay in the cave forever, or you can return to the light. And if you're reaching ever new heights, realize that your pride may make you fall. And if you do have too much pride, you will fall, regardless of my warnings. But when it happens, realize why, what is in service to, and if you fall for even 1 second less, my time will be worth it. And your time too.